Russia is paving the way to deploy about 2 million military reservists to Ukraine. Under new legislation, conscripts could be called up to fight in peacetime, for the first time to avoid unpopular mobilization drive. Russia is paving the way to deploy about 2 million military reservists to Ukraine under new legislation. The rule change could unlock a vast number of troops at a time when Vladimir Putin is under pressure to mobilize new forces to refresh and expand his 700,000-strong force in Ukraine. The amendments to the law, likely to be backed by Parliament, would allow reservists to be called up during peacetime rather than when war has been declared, given that Moscow still calls its invasion of Ukraine a special military operation. It would allow the Russian president to avoid another deeply unpopular round of mobilization, something he has so far resisted after a partial drive in September 2022 prompted tens of thousands of Russian men to flee the country. Alexei Zhuravlev, deputy chairman of Russia's Parliamentary Defense Committee, said the force of 2 million reservists were professionals in their field, but were currently being unused. Until now, it has only been possible to use this potential during periods of martial law or mobilization. We are engaged in very real and large-scale combat operations in Ukraine, but officially, war has not been declared, he told RTVI News. A further amendment would authorize their deployment abroad. Andrei Kartapolov, head of the Russian Parliament's Defense Committee, said that Putin could choose to deploy the reservists in Ukraine's northeastern Sumy and Kharkiv regions, where Moscow has been attempting to take new ground. Russian conscripts are usually forbidden by law from being sent to combat zones. They were killed in their thousands during Ukraine's incursion into the Russian Kursk region. The sheer numbers deployed by Moscow, fighting alongside thousands of soldiers sent from North Korea, eventually managed to squeeze Kiev's troops out of the country. As Moscow continues to ramp up its war effort, Russian forces bombed a United Nations convoy delivering humanitarian aid to a frontline town in southern Ukraine. 2 trucks, clearly marked with the insignia of the World Food Program, WFP, were heavily damaged in the drone and artillery strike in the Kherson region, but all the staff escaped unharmed, the UN said. Matthias Schmale, the UN's humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, branded Tuesday's attack utterly unacceptable. Aid workers are protected by international humanitarian law and should never be attacked, he said, calling the strike a gross violation of international humanitarian law and might amount to a war crime. Footage shared by local officials showed a white truck with the WFP emblem on fire, with large plumes of smoke rising above it. The front of the vehicle, which was unloading aid close to the town of Bilozerka, was largely destroyed. Andriy Sybiha, Ukraine's foreign minister, described it as another brutal violation of international law, proving Russia's utter disregard for civilian lives and its international obligations. Aid groups working in Ukraine throughout the Russian invasion have said their staff and facilities have regularly come under bombardment. There was no immediate response from Moscow on the aid truck coming under fire. However, officials very rarely comment on accusations of attacks on civilians or aid workers. The southern Kherson region is partially controlled by Russian forces, who launch daily attacks on Ukrainian towns and cities from the southern banks of the Dnipro River. Moscow claims to have annexed the area in 2022. The UN said the trucks were trying to reach a community that had not received humanitarian assistance in months due to the threat of Russian attacks. On the diplomatic front, Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, will travel to Washington on Friday to try and shore up more support from Donald.